that there are opportunities and that there are things that we can do and that there are things that are being done. And the second point that I think is vitally important is we use the word future a lot. And I've been going to Davos for many years. It's not future, it's now. These are things that are already in place that are taking action. And I have to say it's probably one of the best joys of moderating panels or giving talks, because it's not that long ago where everything we talked about was future. It wasn't happening. And what we're going to hear today is about things that have happened and are happening. And the goal of this, and then I'll stop chattering and you can hear from our esteemed guests, because you're here for them, not me, is the goal of this is that you take something away. And it's why I asked if it's your first Davos, right? It's not a one-shot. We don't fix the world in these sessions. We don't come up and present the solution and then you listen to it and think it's going to happen. Something that I was taught on my first Davos, and it blew my mind and still does, is you think, how can we possibly make change at scale with these conversations? But when you come to a place like Davos, you're only 2 degrees of separation away from affecting 1 billion people. You know, we've seen sessions this week from leaders, from prime ministers, from presidents, from corporate leaders that have millions of customers and serve, from family businesses, family offices that employ millions of people. It really does only take a handful of people to take heed and to think about some of the things that we talk about in these kinds of sessions to make change at scale. And so if you're thinking about how to frame this about what you hear today, you maybe think, maybe this isn't relevant for me. You're wrong, because if you're here, you're a change maker. And you can have an influence. And so that's what we want you to take away from that. But enough from me. I'm going to move on to our panelists. We're going to talk about a lot of different aspects, because again, a livable future can mean lots of different things. And what we've tried to represent here is what is that intersection that is vital between society, between philanthropy, between corporates and between governments. There's so much at stake. There's so many things to get done. And I'm going to move on to talking about some of these things with our panelists now. So, Patricia, I'd like to turn to you first, if I may. Patricia, as the former Secretary of Economic Development for the state of Sao Paulo, you've championed initiatives aimed at fostering inclusive, innovative and sustainable economic growth, what you described as an economy that works for people, the climate, and businesses. Could you share with our audience here some of the critical lessons from your work at the state level and how those strategies might serve as a model for other regions that are looking to balance economic growth with social environmental resilience?
Shall we try? Well, thanks a lot, Philip, for the invitation, for the work that you're doing here. These exchanges in Davos are very important. When you talked about our definition of what a livable future is, I think the technical concept that we work with is exactly what you said. I always say that we are promoting a net positive economic development model that's positive to people, nature, and businesses. But if I would translate that in a more personal note, it would be a future where people don't depend on luck to really thrive in life. And I come from a family that is from a very poor family in Brazil that didn't have access to education. I was the first one to go to university. The biggest family, first degree that I know, it's 120 people, first degree. My grandmother had 21 kids, the mother of my father. And my grandmother in my mom's side had 7. She was an indigenous woman who got married to a miner. So my family is a good case example of the diversity that we have in the country, but also of the lack of opportunities. So even now, have a person like me saying that I was the first one to go to the university is completely crazy. São Paulo is a city that has more than 20 million people. The state where I was a secretary is 45 million people. I was born in this neighborhood called Campo Limpo. Today I live in a neighborhood called Jardins. It's 20 kilometers of distance between the neighborhoods. Apparently, I gained more than 20 years of life because I changed my zip code. My family keeps living in the same area where I was born. So all these 120 people who are still there, they will live at least 20 years less than I will do because I changed my zip code. In this city, that's actually the richest city in the country. So when we talk about a livable future, if we put on top of the inequality, the issues that we have with climate, geopolitical challenges, everybody closed their borders, so we do have challenges, but I'm optimistic. And then 3 examples of what we did in São Paulo. I took the position as a secretary when the pandemic started. So instead of taking care of the economy, I was put in charge of the crisis cabinet for the pandemic. And we had to create jobs and protect people and help with vaccines when the president was against science and vaccines in Brazil. So 3 examples. We focused on economic growth. We managed to reach the highest economic growth in the history of the States. The year that we grew the most was 21, the worst year of the pandemic. So the second worst, 2020, was very bad too. 7.5% of growth, 5 times more than the average of the country. We also attracted more than $200 billion in investments to the state in 3 years, was the highest number. But we focused a lot on skill building and in promoting access to education, jobs, and entrepreneurship to the people who were excluded. And then we had to work focused on 2 million people, especially women. We had inequality in Brazil as all over the world. We have 3 main issues, gender, race, and the economic inequality. So we had to reach the people who were having less access to information and to protection during the pandemic. So we achieved good results. We proved that it's possible to do that. We had a 3-year journey to make that happen in a state that was very wealthy. So the question to us now is that given the new conditions that we have in the world, how we can work more closely together and globalize the solutions in a world that's getting more and more fragmented.
I mean, the stats speak for themselves. It's incredible that in that time of such craziness and chaos that you're able to focus and cut through noise to look at what really matters. I'm interested in, as we move in sort of today in 2025 and we're looking for the future, what kind of metrics are you looking at to measure this? Of course, economic growth is a metric that we can all look at, but is it the age expectancy now? Is it the happiness? What are we looking at within the...
It's age expectancy with quality of life. There is an index called DELI. The only book that I published was about health, by the way, and longevity with quality of life. So the main index is that, like, years of life is 1, but now we have a big challenge that the world got older without dividing and spreading prosperity in a more equal way. So we'll have people getting old without quality of life. So I think that the challenge in this livable future is how we can help to include more people as we aged so quickly. It was a very big advancement, I would say, but at the same time brought a challenge. Like, our generations still think of a life where people would live 60 years and we would go to school, we would work and retire. This no longer works. So what's going to be the model now? And again, with the geopolitical situation that we have now and the climate crisis that we have now, and because I'm an optimistic, I also believe that we live in a very special moment, and we are very privileged because we are in an inflection point. Right. We are being, and I'll close the point on the DELI with 2 points. We learned since the Industrial Revolution that started in your country that we are resources, human and natural resources. If we say goodbye to that concept, I think we will have a chance to change this to a livable future.
Right. And of course, I can't move on without recognizing that this year, COP30, of course, comes to Brazil. It's a unique opportunity for the country to lead the global conversation on sustainability. I'd love to get your perspective on that and how preparations are going.
Preparations are going okay, could be better.
It's always last minute, don't worry.
We are happy that 2 days ago we finally had the announcement of the COP president. It's going to be Ambassador André Correia do Lago. He's a very knowledgeable, very good negotiator. Brazilians, by the way, have a tradition in negotiation. And I think we have a very important opportunity. COPs started in Brazil in Rio 92. Right. They were created there. Unfortunately, we divided in 3 COPs, and we are discussing climate separated from nature, separated from desertification. Yeah. Hopefully, we will take this opportunity to rethink the process as well. So that's why I talked about the resources again. We will go back to the country that has the highest concentration of nature. The highest diversity, biodiversity, water, people diversity as well. So we have a chance to be together there in nature, connecting to nature to rethink all these processes. I know it's easy to say, what I'm saying about nature, resources. I was a consultant at McKinsey for almost 20 years, and I'm part of the problem too, because the thing that I repeated all the time was, let's learn from best practices and let's repeat it somewhere else. And this doesn't make sense anymore, right? So we need to create new solutions, and we need to understand that we will fail many times doing that. But that time, the window is also closing now. So it is a good opportunity. We have no option but try new things, you know. And then again, forgetting that we learned that scarcity is the only way to go, but it's not true. Nature is abundant. And the more we learn about that, the more solutions we will create.
I'm curious as well. We know what things are supposed to be done so often. And then the thing that seems to be lacking is how the decision is made. And again, you mentioned I'm from the United Kingdom. Like the amount of going around in circles on decisions in my country is particularly frustrating right now, where we appear to have two parties, but actually they're the same. We're not making progress. We can't seem to find the right way to get things done. Whether it's at government or corporations, and we're going to talk about certainly family businesses and philanthropy, which might be slightly different, but I'm really curious about what was it that made the decision of we're going to do this and let's clear the path to allow these things to be done?
This is the main challenge, because collaboration between public, private, social sector is not easy.
No.
And in the case of what happened in São Paulo, when you asked what made it work, I'm not a politician, and I was not running for office for the next term. And many of our decisions were not popular in the short term, especially when you're fighting against populism and you need to take decisions with data. I was the person every day who had to go to the press to talk to 45 million people and tell them whether they could go to work or stay at home, and which business would open, which business would close. And every day I was hated by half of the population. You know, some people needed to go to work to get food on the table. I remember, for example, the hairdressers and entrepreneurs from bars and events, the things that we had to close first, they were not happy, you know. So you need to be prepared emotionally, financially, and physically to be out there to do these things. I think I did that for 3 years, but then after that, I spent another 3 years recovering, right? Because I had a post-traumatic stress syndrome because we were threatened every day. I had depression. We had to heal that as well. My kids, I have twin girls, they are 10 years old. They had to walk around with security guards. So it's a reality that I didn't know. I had no idea about that. So I think we need to learn to collaborate, take risks, but the main thing as a global leadership network, we need to create a safety container. We need to have a place to go back. You know, if we fail, it's okay. You know, because if we care, our ego on these times play a very tricky role. Because if you want to succeed only, make money in the short term, be recognized, then we will never do what needs to be done.
I couldn't agree more, and I'll get told off if I dive into that. But I run a whole separate session on about appetites for risk and how we treat responsibility as well, because it does need to change. But Patricia, thank you. I'm going to come back to you later, but I want to move on. When we think about decisions, Alexis, you're the CEO of the Family Business Network International, and in doing so, you represent thousands of family businesses that collectively shape significant portions of the global economy. And I'm really interested in your perspective on how are family businesses and family offices leveraging their influence, their capital, their philanthropy to prioritize sustainability investments. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I have family businesses and family offices that are with me. I've seen a big shift in the last 10, 15 years, but I'd love to get the sort of inside track, because I think that they're of vital importance to being the leaders in driving some of this change, because I think they've got the agility, they've got the capability, and they've got the want.
Thank you, Philippe, and thank you, Patricia. I think you haven't lost your passion, your leadership, and it was very inspiring to hear you despite everything you had to go through. So please continue. And I'm very pleased to be here also with one of our members, who's the vice chair of our board, Marianne Tsao, who comes from a family that has helped us grow and develop in Asia. And what I'm very pleased of is to be, you know, we're from Brazil to Asia. We're the old white Western Caucasian males, and I've been on a few panels where there were too many of us. So, but I'm very pleased to have you. Now, to answer your question, Philip, I think there has been a switch in business families for several reasons. Business families represent 70% of the economy worldwide. In Brazil, I think it's 85%. We're talking from SMEs to large companies. The first switch has been because of a new generation. A new generation that wants families to look at their polycapital, and I'll explain the concept in a coherent way. When you look at business families, they have their legacy businesses, their assets, they have increasingly financial power because they've made a lot of money, and yes, that might not have been redistributed that well. They also have a lot of philanthropy, and we'll hear from Marianne about that. And they have advocacy, they have a voice. And for many years, families were using those different capitals, those different assets, not always with coherence. And the new generation basically wants coherence and alignment. I'm going to obviously very simplify, and we'll hear from a real story, but they don't want the profitable plant polluting the river and the family philanthropy foundation cleaning up the river. Mm-hmm. They want alignment. And I think that is the first driver. In our network, we have 22,000 members, 8,000 members are next gens, and they have a voice, they have a strong voice, and they're prepared to quit. Right. And families work a lot on their legacies, as you know. They have monumental personalities, and when they hear that the next generation is going to quit because they're not aligned, it triggers some interesting cross-generation conversation.
You want to be a YouTube creator.
Yes. I would say the second thing is the fact that, and I'm quite optimistic as you are, but the fact that we need to be working together, and we need to be more vocal. Our network has been very private and a safe space for families to exchange. But in 2019, we decided to do our coming out and say it's riskier for business families to be private than to become more public. Now, you have to look at private safety because you were talking about your case of your own family. You're not a business, but politicians take risk. And in some countries, being public can be threatening. But I think it's about taking that risk and also using their voices to continue to do the right thing. And business families have that intrinsic view that, they think in generations, not in quarters. And they have the intrinsic view that a thriving community around them is good for their businesses. So many of them have done it. Now, they don't talk enough about it. And we need more examples on how those businesses have worked with communities and government to really make that happen. Because let's be humble, they don't have all the answers. And we were hearing from Jesper Brodin the other day from IKEA, the CEO of IKEA, which has done tremendous work on CO2 reduction. I think they've reduced their CO2 emission by 30% over the past years, while continuing to grow their business by 18%. But he said we are reaching the limit on what we can do on our own. We need to work with our competitors, first thing, and with government to be able to make those changes. And indeed, time is running, so let's do it now.
And taking looks at the value chain too. IKEA just 2 weeks ago announced their $1 billion fund to have to start vertically integrating through the supply chains for things like textile recycling, because the corporates on their own and the government subsidies don't exist. In Europe, it's incredible to me as someone from the recycling industry for as long as I am that we haven't made the progress on things like textile recycling and the value chain there. And yet, if you look at what again owned by many family businesses, the growth of the fashion sector, they've been the polar opposite. And so it takes brave leadership for IKEA to say, if we are going to be consistent in leading in the sales of these products, we've got to take responsibility for the life cycle of them.
And the value chain, and it's a very important point you make, the value chain means, how do you measure and what do you measure? And if we continue to only measure financial profits and accounting, we're not going to get there. We've heard a lot about, how do you measure nature? How do you measure human talent? And it's not to, be more performant about it or be more exploitive about it. It's really to say that let's put a price on nature. As long as we won't price the externalities, it will not work. And let's make sure that we do that. And I think hopefully business families can play a role there, because they don't need to report on a quarterly basis. I mean, some of them are listed and need to do that. But there's really that strong view that a value-based approach is essential, but values for all stakeholders. And let's face it, in many countries, the middle class has gone down.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the measure of wealth of a nation and of democracy.
I'm curious as well whether you see regulation as a driver for some of this. There's an intense amount of regulation that's coming out now. The one that I'm closest with is CSRD and EPRS, where we have a situation where many, a lot of family businesses, many that I know, they'll be reporting for the first time this year on what truly is the metrics and the marks. I mean, there are plenty of situations of companies that have reported 80% reductions in CO2, but they're talking about scope 1 and 2, and actually 98% of their total emissions are in scope 3. So I think there's going to be a real moment of perhaps contemplation and almost embarrassment, and I wonder whether you're seeing any decisions starting to be made because of regulation on
that's why we need to be humble. It's going to be very hard and painful. I mean, we started our sustainability journey at FBN 15 years ago. We worked with B Corp from 2014, 2015, where we were already talking to our members saying, look, it's coming. You are going to have to measure. And we did a lot of work with them. And now we don't need to work with B Corp because regulation is there. CSRD is there. And yes, there will be resistance. Yes, too much regulation and bad regulation and compliance. If it's only, to tick boxes, it's not going to work. But that is going to happen. Businesses will have to report. It's going to cost. Now, how do we make sure that it becomes an instrument for innovation and not just a tick-the-box exercise? I think that's fundamental. I think all regulations have to evolve because the world is changing. And that's why working hand in hand with politicians is essential. We now, for the first time at FBN, have a partnership with the UN to also have a seat at the table, to continue to bring the voice of business families so that they can be heard and they can be seen as a solution and not as a problem. But again, that will require some hard choices, that will require some fundamental changes, and that will require to really make sure that we see nature and human capital as capitals that can be measured and that can be leveraged for the greater good.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alexis. Slightly pivot here, move on to Jeffrey. Energy is just a huge topic of conversation, and I don't know what the collective feeling is in the room, but one of the things I've noted this year, and I should caveat this, I say this as somebody who owns an AI company, the conversation has really shifted to AI entirely this year, almost to the point of the climate discussion taking a slight back seat, and that concerns me, both as an environmentalist, but also somebody who's very firmly in the technology space. The outcome of that, and to achieve net zero, of course, we have to move to rapid decarbonisation, and actually the insatiable appetite of AI means that the energy grid is under even more pressure than ever before. And Jeffrey, you've got a vast experience as a research geologist and leader of the US Geological Survey's Potential for Geologic Hydrogen Resources project. I'd love to see the size of your business card. I'd love to just get a perspective on all the different pathways you see for creating what we need, which is a sustainable, resilient, and equitable global energy system.
Sure, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be part of the panel, actually. I'm really excited about this. Clearly, I think one of the underlying themes in all of this is how do we decarbonize? How do we come up with a sustainable energy that is supportive of the climate of our planet, and clearly renewables are a major piece of that puzzle, and we are moving in those directions, and there's I think there's notable progress, and we should take notice of that and encourage that. But the renewables themselves will not get us to net zero. I mean, that's very clear that there are major sectors sectors of the global economy that simply cannot be electrified. Things like sustainable aviation fuel. You need other feedstocks to make those, or to make green steel, and these are significant parts of the economy. And so to get there, we're going to need hydrogen to get there. There's a lot of plans out there saying that we can make all the hydrogen that we need with what we call green hydrogen, splitting water using renewable electricity, or from blue hydrogen, where we make hydrogen from fossil fuel and then combine that with carbon capture and sequestration. But today in the world, we're making about 100 million tons of hydrogen for commercial use, and it's thought to get to net zero to make aviation fuel and these other needs, that we're going to need to ramp that up to maybe 400 or 500 megatons of hydrogen. And if you look at where we are now, 100 megatons of hydrogen is all coming from fossil fuels. Less than 1% is actually coming from low carbon sources, and so we're way behind the projections of where we need to get to this hydrogen that's going to take us to net zero, and so it's a big challenge. And when you put it into the bigger context of what other materials and workflow needs to go into making the infrastructure for the low carbon hydrogen, that's also a huge challenge. The amount of critical minerals that are going to be needed we have to mine the minerals to make the electrolyzers that can then make this hydrogen. And when you add that all up, it's an enormous challenge. We're running out of time, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, that this is not something in the future. This is today, and I'm here with a bit of good news, though, and this is the dark side of it.
That's nice.
But
We love
yes,
good news, don't we?
But I am, like our other panelists, actually an optimist. And my background is actually from the oil and gas sector. I've spent more than 20 years doing research around natural gas. And I am a believer that natural gas is a bridge to a cleaner energy mix. And we've seen that in the U.S. We have all of our carbon emission reductions in the U.S. have come from transitioning from coal to gas. And it's been a win, a big win. But it's not going to get us all the way there. And so the good news on the hydrogen front is that very recently there's been a growing recognition now that actually there's potential for deposits of naturally occurring hydrogen in the subsurface. I've done some work with my colleagues to make some estimates of what the amount might be, and it's astonishing. It's actually a very, very large amount of hydrogen, potentially enough to supply all of the hydrogen that we think we would need for maybe thousands of years. The key challenge, though, that we're facing at this point is that although we think there's a lot in the subsurface, we really don't know where it is. And almost certainly most of it is going to be inaccessible. And so it's just going to be uneconomic to produce. It's going to be far offshore or much too deep or in small accumulations. But we're beginning now to put together geologic models and an understanding on how we can explore for this and how we might be able to actually find it and produce it economically. And this could be a huge game changer for our whole energy mix. But another big challenge that we're facing, I think, is that we're just now getting started to try and understand this novel resource, and we don't have time to dilly-dally about getting into this. That it took 100 years to develop the oil and gas infrastructure and industry, and we don't have that kind of time. And so we really do need to accelerate the work that we're doing in this space to begin to understand it.
Thank you. And you've baited yourself there, because we've got to obviously talk about the comments made by a certain someone of drill very recently. I think we're all discerning how much is hyperbole and strange flexes versus reality. But as someone who has come from the oil and gas industry and works in the US, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think the practicalities might be moving forward. And I'll add one more comment to that, because I was at another panel session, a private session last night, and I was with people that were in air capture and storage, and they just signed off on a major plant, and and were waiting for the check to commence work, which would have taken them to, hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon removal. And the question is, they just simply don't know if it's going to happen now and if that check will come. I think my concern, of course, is what gets tossed out and what sets us back yet further, because resources and capital get redeployed back to things that we know aren't the right thing. And you can perhaps compound that even more with the news that came out this week of Project Stargate, the announcement with OpenAI, where, let's spend $500 billion on building an enormous requirement. And I looked into the energy of, there's no renewable energy going into that. It's in, right? So a lot of thoughts, a lot of things, and of course nothing's quite real and we don't know what is, but I'd love your thoughts on what we might see and how can we not lose progress?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does, and I share your concerns. But I will say that the energy sector is a global market, and no one country can really drive how it works. And I have a lot of contact with majors in the oil and gas sector, and in all my conversations with them, they tell me that the politics within the United States is not the sole driver of their policies, that they recognize that it's a global market and they respond to that, and they are very interested in this prospects for natural hydrogen, and are supporting research around this now, and I think there's too much momentum in the move away from fossil fuels that there may be bumps in the road. This may be a short-term setback, but things will keep moving in this direction, absolutely.
I found that remarkably soothing. Thank you. I'm going to move on, and this I'm very excited about this. Miriam, as chairwoman of the Sao Family Office and the foundation, you're also an authority on social inclusion and sustainable development. Your philanthropic leadership and the relationship between the family business, the family office, the foundation has already driven transformative initiatives across multiple sectors. And so I'd love to get an insight into the work that you've been doing and how you view it, and if you're able to share any of the stories of the work you've done, which are remarkable.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words. I'm not sure I deserve all that, but but we try. But just before I talk about my experience with philanthropy and as running a family office, is that actually, the family offices, because of family-driven, generally speaking, much more interested in the long term, whether investments or investing in the resources. My we're a fourth-generation shipping family. We've expanded to include other industries, but nonetheless, we've been really trying to catch up over the tail because shipping, right? So we tried to design more energy-efficient ships. We're trying to compensate by including carbon credits as cost of doing business. We're trying to compensate by devoting resources to the ocean, things like that. But still, it's a trial. And I think that we try to, when we make investment from family office, we do have some portion of just sort of somewhat venture, and then we'll be willing to, of course, invest in clean energy that might not give us any return for a very long time. So I think family offices, families are good that way because we're not looking for maximum, generally speaking, maximum return in the shortest time as corporations do. So that is an advantage. But back to the thing about philanthropy, I think philanthropy in our family's view is actually back to the original definition. That has nothing to do with giving away money. It's everything to have to do with taking positive actions of a concern of the well-being of others. So therefore, all of us are philanthropists because we all have moments, if hopefully many moments, where we devote our attention, resources to well-being of somebody else or Earth. So with that kind of attitude, then of course, we use our business, our philanthropy, and investment as just different vehicles and tools to try to express that value. So easier said than done, of course, because typically, as many family offices do is that we maximize the return on investment, whichever way how, and then we try to spend some money in philanthropy, try to fix a problem we created. So it's quite schizophrenic, but I find that many family offices are not aware of that quality, and I think Alexa referred to that, and I think with an FBN we try to not do that. Okay, so I think that's number one. And the second thing is that any kind of philanthropic activity, by my definition, is good. It could be something very small, it could be very big. But if we want to have really sustainable changes in the systems level, then of course nobody can ever do enough, because philanthropic dollars is really a drop in the bucket compared to market capital, right? I mean, it's just a resource available in the market. It's far more than what it can do with philanthropy, even though we like to think that we can look ahead, we can be the catalyst, we can take that risk, and the first tranche of money might put in to kickstart something. So that's that is that, we want to really be making big changes. You have to collaborate across different sectors, be with, of course, government, other businesses, philanthropy, family offices, and very much I think that we have to be that interface between the people, the earth, or the civil society, to work with them and try to deeply understand what the rich issues really are, and then we can should be the first one to reach out to the other businesses, to government. Because you can't wait for people to come to us. But generally speaking, most philanthropists do that. They sit there and they wait for people to come ask for grants. And then they will try to make the best of it. And I don't think that's the right way. The right way really must be have to deep in the community or in environment to really understand what's going on. And we can be that bridge. We can be that bridge to reach out to the different sectors and bring together that dialogue. That said, though, it's very difficult to have conversation amongst government, who is very risk adverse, and businesses who are very profit driven, and nonprofits maybe are more values driven, and people come from very different places. So it's really tricky to have that conversation to make it really work, being that bridge between the issue, the people, the community, the earth, and all the people that needs to be involved. And I do think that philanthropists have that good role to try to reach out to do that. That's my third point, is that my experience has been that it's actually requires the person who tries to do that to really strive to be the best higher self and not get mixed up with their own issues, ego, and that sort of thing. I'll tell you one story. I learned this lesson very painfully because I've been doing this in this role for 30 plus years. So I thought it was pretty good. I'm pretty, I'm really only focused on the well-being and really not about myself and all that. And I was working a project in Bhutan, and then this is some years back, and then all the government agencies that are trained, the agents are trained in India. So they're kind of like Indian bureaucrats, in many ways very bureaucratic. So, of course, Bhutan, when you go travel there, you have to, if a tourist, so they spend $200 a day just to be there, right? So I'm there to work. I can't afford, I don't want to spend $200 a day just to be there. So we need to apply for a special visa. So, but then we're leaving Friday, about 6 of us going, and then, visa's not forthcoming. So finally, I have to track down this officer's wife. They asked her to chase after him to give us a visa so we know whether we're going or not. And the team was kind of pro bono team, so they're coming from different places, from Thailand, Malaysia. They're all taking the time. So we need to know whether they're getting a plane or not, right? So after that, I was kind of stressed by that, and I was stressed about making money, for raising money, and people didn't really know where Bhutan was in those days. So it was really difficult. It was a project to raise money to build housing for older people in Bhutan. Who wants to give money for that, So it's actually I was really stressed. It was expensive to build in Bhutan because everything's shipped up. Every single piece of brick is shipped up from India and was on top of some mountain, right? So it cost a few $1 million to raise for that project. It was much more than I thought. So at some point I got quite stressed and I ended up with palsy, so I was not feeling very well. So then I thought, and my friends are saying, why are you doing this, stressing yourself out? You're working so hard, raise money and blah, blah, blah. You should quit. I'm thinking, yeah, I should quit. So I did. I wrote them and said, you can take what I've got. I'm quitting. But luckily for me, I have a very strong mentor. And he wrote me and said, well, heard you're not feeling well. I said, yeah, this project's stressing me out. And he said, well, how's that project going? And I said, I quit. So then he said, why did you do it? For people to be nice to you? Wow, I felt so ashamed. And he goes, I suspect the ego's raising its ugly head. Right? I'm thinking, I'm raising money, I'm working so hard, and you should be nice to me. It's nothing about me at all. It's really about developing these older people who need a home. So we don't remember clearly the goal of what we're trying to do and make sure we're very aware of when these icky things happen within yourself. We will fail because it's hard. But good things are never easy to do. You have to really have your eyes locked in the prize and not let your personal, whatever it is, get in the way. So I'm just sharing this bit because I think it's a way to do it well. It's the best thing ever done for myself. So it's, like that.
Absolutely love it. A well-deserved round of applause. It'll probably come as no surprise that we completely subscribe to this. The Free Thinker Society, we're running a session this afternoon on enlightened leadership to talk about this, because ego is at the center of the majority of wrong things, and particularly within capitalism and whichever stage we are at within the late stage of it, it still is the thing that is holding people back and causes us to make those same mistakes again, and we'll talk about that. We've got a few minutes left, and I want to open up a couple of questions to the whole panel. And lead from that, because two things that I'm very passionate about. I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years, I have my own family business, and as first generation, and also the first to go to university. Sadly, I was the first to get kicked out of university as well, so it didn't go down quite as well as yours. Too keen to get into business. But one of the things that I see changing as being someone who's been with, we've got a cap table with family offices and venture capital, is that all systems are changing, are in the process of changing. And I've been talking about this a lot this week in various sessions. It seems to me that it's the rules, if you will, whether it's a contractual, whether it's the treaty, whether it's the way it was set up, and I think it applies to everything, is redefining what it should be. And family businesses, family offices have started to do that sooner because they have the control and can make the decision. Certainly in my world, when someone has gone, we've never done this before, but now we're going to. In fact, we couldn't do that before because this stopped us from doing it. My mental model for this is that family offices will be the ones that could change it quicker. Large corporations that are public companies that are governed by boards are slightly slower, and the ones that are slowest to change will be the governments, because we're led by the bureaucracy and the democracy, and again, not always reliable to make the right decisions, and then the way that it takes how long it takes to push things through. So to what extent, and it's open to everybody, do you think changing systems, the different rules that VCs or LPs are looking at, and will play a part in these livable futures? Because I think that's what's holding a lot of the action back, is that they just go, well, we haven't done it like that before. Are you seeing changes either at corporation, family, or government where there's an appetite or an interest to change the rules of the game?
I can start with the example in the case of Brazil. I'm seeing something like the opposite of what you described because of the type of government that we have today. The Ministry of Finance started a program on the ecological transformation of the country. So it was the first time that a Minister of Finance stepped up to talk about a prosperity plan that measured not only economic growth, but also jobs creation and carbon emissions. So we've been helping them now through the IA Institute and also our work at Systemic to create exactly the analysis of the value chains that Brazil could be developing now to create a new model. And we proved that we could double the GDP growth, add more than 10 million jobs opportunities, and reduce the emissions, contributing to the reduction of the emissions in the world. The challenge there, to your point, is how to measure that in the businesses and what are the reinforcing mechanisms. Because in the US, we had a recent evolution, but it was based in fiscal incentives with the Inflation Reduction Act, was the main boost that we had in clean energy recently. And the response in Europe for the first time was also through fiscal benefits with the European Green Deal, because before was more through moral suasion. And then we see the China example that's also through fiscal benefits. So I was expecting that the business would change faster, but things are actually being pushed by the governments through the fiscal benefits. In the case of Brazil, because we don't have the fiscal space for those types of mechanisms, it's a challenge now in the next few years how this implementation of these new programs will happen. Because today what's happening, we export basic commodities, right? So meat, chicken, iron ore, corn, soy are the main exports. The solution for the country would be the best solution for other countries too, which is to advance in the value chains, clean energy, biosaf, superfoods, critical minerals, and batteries for electrification. But for that to happen, the investments would have to happen in a way that developing economies don't have the cash for that to happen, and we would have to push for global value chains. So aside from the metrics inside of the businesses, I think the main challenge is also our main opportunity, which is this counter movement towards globalization in a moment that the countries are closing their borders. I'll give 2 examples. The lithium electrification globally is the most ineffective value chain that we have today. We are extracting lithium in poor countries. We are processing lithium in the US with brown energy and then exporting to Europe. So we are actually adding more carbon in the value chains. If we shift the production to the countries where you have clean energy, you will make the prosperity distribution more equal, but you will also reduce the emissions of carbon. So this could be happening now. SAF is another example. Right now, Brazil exporting ethanol to the US, being processed in Georgia, in other areas, and exporting to Europe. So the solution comes from, yes, I think family-owned businesses have a huge power, but we will need to work together in the global standards. CSRD is going to be an opportunity, science-based targets as well, but we will have to work sectorially in each one of the value chains to define standards in a way that we re-globalize the value chains.
I think, just to build on that, I think we see change because of science, and science brings technology, and technology brings change. And we're probably at a stage in the history of the world where, for the first time, the new generation knows more than the older generation on a certain number of topics. Now, the one thing they can't purchase or accelerate is experience. Okay, and experience comes through failure and learning from failure and starting again, and this iteration process.
And that we have a lot.
And that we have a lot. But I think I'm quite optimistic, even though sometimes I'm a bit, when I look at my children and the next generation we have in our network. But I'm optimistic because I think there's an accumulation of knowledge, education, opportunities, access to technology that, I mean, they will find the solutions. I'm very optimistic that they will find a solution. No, I think we have to trust, we have to support that generation in its trials and errors, with everything that comes with it. But I think it will happen. And again, we are, the way we are as a species is we resist change.
I mean, some of the best examples I've seen foundations launching funds and operating like early stage investors, where it's basically tacit permission to fail, because like the classic VC model, which paradoxically is no longer, in my opinion, working for a lot of the new style of business coming. But it's great for a foundation because you're saying it's okay if 99% of these don't work first time. We're making these asymmetric bets, but doing it through this lens of a sort of almost an old VC model. I think it's a great innovation of sort of cross-pollinating sort of different traditional paths to give that permission to the generations to say, go try this, because we need that risk, we need the innovation, but we need to remove stigma of failure.
And that's the one thing we still continue to learn from the US. They have that amazing capacity to, learn from failure and make failure. I mean, no, I'm really, that's, I've lived in the US for 10 years and every time I travel anywhere in the world, I don't see that anywhere else in the world. That capacity, maybe in Brazil, you're a young country, you're a country with a lot of youth energy and with, people who are prepared to take risks and try and fail and try and fail. I think that is something we need to bring more to the world, and I think it will happen. Now, as in any transition, it will be rocky. On the social side, we need to make sure that we don't leave too many people behind, because that's the big challenge, including on the environmental transition. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. None of the solutions individually will get us there. So we will continue to have. I mean, look at China. They're building as many coal plants as they're building solar panels.
Yeah.
So. Why? Because they have 1.5 billion people that they need to continue to feed. So so we'll have to be pragmatic through the transition, but we'll have to continue to innovate.
Very good. Let me do a quick time check here, because I know we started a little late and we were going later. Christina, do you want me to start wrapping up? Okay. And if some of you are on times because you're planning for other sessions, please feel free to make your way out. Otherwise, we'll keep going so that we can wrap up just in the next few minutes. Deeply inspired by the breadth and depth of insights here. From Patricia's reflections on the transformative work in Sao Paulo shows that it can be done at city levels, at state levels, and run and led by governments. Moving to Alexis' discovery of what these new family businesses are doing and how they're looking at these models where it's not just about a return on investment, that they're thinking about how do we align these values? And it's really stuck. It's stuck out in my head of polluting the rivers from the business and then paying the philanthropy to clean up the rivers. That doesn't make any sense. It never has. And so aligning those visions is great. And that agility to be able to make those decisions and transformations.
And adding one thing is the message to our young people in our network who are super privileged. I mean, it's how do you outperform your index of privileges? How do you go beyond that index? Because that is something that you will be looked at not only by your own family, but more importantly by your community and people who work with you.
Also great, love that. Jeffrey, the energy challenges, I mean, it's stark. We all know energy has been the main focus for the last 25 years because we know it's the biggest single mover of decarbonisation and we've got to get there. So I really appreciate your thoughts and your hope as well on that, which is really encouraging. And Marianne, to hear about how these aspects no longer operate as separate, but philanthropy goes out hand in hand. And it's one of the things that I talk about too, which is there's no shame in the world in which we live of making these things business models. That they have to work economically. The idea that we can just philanthropic contributions passed $1 trillion a year this year. That's significant, but you're quite right. Pales in comparison to the market cap of corporates, but still is significant. But it's not something that we can expect that we just keep pouring money in because we feel bad for this. Oh, that's a shame. We've got to create models, and that was a lot of the work that I get involved in. Is if I can prove that this actually makes profit, but also makes it, you remove the barriers, and we just get things done. And I'm very encouraged and very excited that and I'll refer right back to the title of this, a livable future. It has to be sustainable environmentally and economically. We've got to find ways that we can level the playing field. We've got to find ways that we can encourage people to take innovation or to pursue innovation and take risk. And we've got to find ways to make sure that we pull everybody up because climate change is not an equal output in terms of devastation. And so I thank you all for joining us. We could talk for hours about this, like most Davos panel sessions. We'll be around for a few minutes if you want to come and chat. But thank you to all of my panelists and thank you to Free Think Society and to Catalyst Now. Thank you, guys.